Okay, don't see him.
And Lisa, just confirm, since we're letting people in, can they hear me now?
Let's see. Yes. Okay. We got
Oh,
one yes.
great. Thank you so much. We're just going to wait a minute. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Just going to wait a minute to let some others join. We've got a great conversation today. So excited that you're all here. We'll just give it one more minute. Lisa, will you share the presentation deck?
Yes, just a minute.
Great. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining, we're going to get started in just a minute, waiting for a couple more people to join. Thank you for your patience. Here we go. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again for everyone who's joining. Um, Welcome. My name is Lexi Cadlick. I'm the head of partnerships at Wolf, and today's conversation is going to be really exciting. It's about how India's education leaders are adapting to AI, and we'll explore how institutions can balance digital transformation with the human core of learning. So we're joined by some very distinguished guests today who I would love to introduce you to. So if you can move to the next slide, we will meet the panelists for today. So first up, we have Dr. S. Sadagopan. He's one of India's most well-known voices in digital transformation and the future of technical education. Formerly worked as a director at IIIT Bangalore, and we're very excited to have him join the conversation today. Next up, we have Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha, and he's the founder and trustee at Ashoka University. He's also the founding dean of ISB and a pioneering architect of modern higher education in India. So we're also very excited to be joined by him as well. And then next we have Abhimanyu. He is the co-founder at Scalar, a very dear partner and member college of Wolf. He's a leader in the space for building tech upskilling courses and a great ecosystem. So thank you as well, Abhimanyu, for being here. And then from the Woolf side, we have Dr. Martin Kurgsman. He leads strategic licensing at Woolf. He works on our academic team. So he is a specialist in all things academia for Woolf, innovation, quality assurance, and he works across all of our different global collegiate colleges. So welcome, Martin, as well. And then finally, I've already introduced myself, but I am Lexi. I'm going to moderate the session today. So we have a lot of great questions, and I'm really excited to get the conversation started. So we will actually dive right in. The first question today that we have is open to the whole panel, but is directed at Dr. Sadagopan and Dr. Pramath. You've both witnessed multiple waves of technological transformation in India's higher education landscape. And so wanted to hear from you, how do you believe we should understand the emergence of AI and the future of what that looks like?
I'll let Dr. Sadagopan go first.
Okay, thank you, Pramath. Okay, first and foremost, thank you for inviting me for this webinar. And a lot of time people keep asking this question, is AI a bubble? Clearly it is not. It is going to stay here for a long, long time. But what we try to do in higher education institutes in India is to take what is called the middle path. Don't take the extreme view. So don't think that, look, AI is a fad that is going to go away. We don't have to do anything. Or the other extreme, that AI will do everything for us. We can be in the golf, playing golf, or kind of be in the beaches. So it's not going to happen. So we still have a lot of work to do. And often people ask this question, PCs came, networks came, how does AI kind of relate to? And our response has been clear. PCs were important, but PCs became far more important when they were networked. Networks were important. They became far more important when they were internetworked, the form of an internet. And we had the web content. Web content was great, but it became far more useful with the internet and the PCs. And the mobile phones were great, but by themselves they were not, but they were nice communicating tool. But the fact that they were always accessible and they had PC-like performance and they could be always on any part of the world and they could fit into our palm, I think that is what made it much more valuable. So it is always the power of the networks and the network effect and the influence across. I think AI is actually going to do much more because this is actually going to build on all these things. And we have what we call population scale app, like what WhatsApp is one of the examples to show that much more is kind of possible. Okay, so maybe I'll stop here and come back because this is my first set of comments. Pramath?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to build on Professor Sadagopan's points, Lexi. I want to go back to, I think you called out our age by saying we've seen these kind of before. But jokes apart, I do think we have and we haven't, and there's some interesting similarities. When I joined my undergraduate program at IIT Kanpur, where Professor Sadagopan was a professor already when I came in to study 18 years of age. In the undergraduate program, even though I was majoring in metallurgical engineering, we all disciplines had to do a full 4-credit course in computer programming. And we were all taught Fortran and Pascal programming. I had no idea of what computers were, what computer languages were. And by then we had already graduated from the card reader system. So computers had already come in, but our curriculum had been changed to make sure that all undergraduates, regardless of their discipline, got a crash course or a full course, not a crash course, but a full course in computer programming. And interestingly, that led for me to do my final year thesis, research thesis, which most engineering programs require you to do, in a completely on a program that was solved entirely by programming, which would not have been possible a few years earlier for a metallurgical engineer.
Mhm.
So just as computers and programming changed the way metallurgy was taught and problems in metallurgy was solved, uh, I think AI is also going to seep into all our curriculum and teaching and expertise that we all built. In fact, Scalar is trying to do that. And Abhimanyu, I'm sure, will talk about that. I'll jump ahead though, because it's not just about a technical skill. At some point I did a PhD and I did a lot of programming, and I abandoned academia and sold out to the world of business and joined a consulting firm where I realized that they used Excel, which is a very crude form of programming according to me, because I'd been used to very sophisticated programming. In fact, we were already calling it artificial intelligence then, what I was doing in my PhD. And again, that's about 40 years ago, 30 years ago. So interestingly, Excel has never made into the curriculum of any educational institutions. In fact, every time we try to teach Excel at an Ashoka, people like say, come on, you can't be serious about this. I mean, this is just a tool. How can you teach a course in Excel, right? Yet Excel skills are extremely valuable in consulting. So when I came in, I was almost treated like a rocket scientist, that I could actually write complex formulas in Excel and build a 1 megabyte Excel model, which no other consultants were able to do. I was cheating because I had done all this complex programming, and Excel was a crude form of programming. My point here is that AI is almost going to become like an everyday application that all of us will use regardless of our technical training. And it's the comfort that you and I have using Zoom and changing our backgrounds and chatting while doing it, uploading stuff, sharing screens, doing collaborative work, which is really how AI is going to take over our lives. So I personally see both dimensions. One, a slightly more deeper technical dimension to this, which will get people to work in the field, advance the field, build new applications in the field. But equally, I see a very everyday application of this to perhaps the most uninitiated, uneducated, formally educated person who should be able to use AI to make their lives better or do their work better.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think what's really interesting is when you speak about Excel, it's something that, you as a human, could learn. And so when we talk about AI and sort of the learning that AI is doing, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about sort of the human element to where you see this going. So maybe this is a good question for Abhimanyu. But if things like, memorization and computation, and if those things are no longer human competitive advantages, what do you believe remains, uniquely human in learning and work with this introduction of AI?
Right. No, so I think how these AI systems are evolving, and actually it's a very interesting thing that the best researchers working on building these AI models are also driving a lot of deep inspirations from how human brain works. Uh, Often we always thought that having the computer systems, super intelligence as we talk about, might outbeat performance of the human brain because they have infinite memory and infinite processing power. But it is also emergent that the reduced memory, the limited memory that we have in our brains is not really a bug, but is a feature. And why we feel so, even when we talk about the advanced AI research, that the learning rate of these models starts hitting a plateau because it is hard for them to forget what they know already. I think there's also a very interesting biological parallel to it. If we look at the first 5 years of growing up of a kid, in those 5 years, we learn so many new things. We learn to walk, we learn a language, right? And it is much harder for us to learn a language later in life. Today, for me, learning, say, Chinese is very hard. But for a kid born in China, it is super trivial. And is that because of memory? Because we have so much memory. Now I have so much memory that learning new things is harder for me. We don't know. Uh, and actually, a lot of AI researchers are trying that. They are trying to cut the memory of the models and see if the pace of learning increases. So I think that is one. And then I think we are still very, very early in this space of AI. Uh, but just adding memory, another interesting argument is that this is a very interesting dichotomy. Just few days back, I had one of our faculty on one extreme where the person said that in the classroom, I don't want people to even keep the laptops. I want them to write down things, because when I'm writing down, it slows me down, and then my absorption of what is being taught is much higher. That is one extreme, right? That I don't even want typing in the classroom. I want people to write with a pen and paper. Another extreme is that another kid who is building a startup, his thesis is that the kid should have AI glasses in the classroom with the cameras and with microphones, that I don't even need to type or write, right? Like that will give a photographic memory to everyone. Everything you see, you have memory of that with you. I think the right answer is somewhere in between,
Yeah.
or intelligently being able to switch between the two. Where do I need photographic memory, or where do I need to just slow down and absorb it more and think deeply about what new thing I'm learning, right? So I think we are, what I see is that on one side, while we see that so much progress has happened in AI and then using AI in learning sciences, but at the same time, it is so early that I think a lot of I do believe is that, like, it's very similar to the 1991 of the internet technology. On one side, we might feel that we have made so much progress, but in reality, a lot is yet to be uncovered and understood.
Thank you for that. Dr. Kurgsman, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Abhimanyu had made lots of points clear, but let me also add that he also used the term middle path. So we don't take the view that, AI is a fad. Similarly, we also don't say that, look, with AI, we don't need degrees, we don't need universities. So what we do even in practice today is that earlier we used to give homeworks and projects. Nowadays, we give a homework and project and also give them a copy of, this is what the chat GPT had said. Can you do something better than that? Right? So in a sense, we kind of peacefully coexist. And memory and computation will always be important. But what will not be important is extreme importance on monetization, memorization, the examinations, etc. And see, just as trigonometric tables and calculators did not make mathematics irrelevant. But we don't confuse calculators that we don't need mathematics, right? I think focus should shift from information to knowledge. And, I give two examples, closed book exams, we generally go for simply because we need to kind of ensure that there is no undue advantage of copying, etc. Open book exams were difficult to manage, particularly in scale, countries like India. But thanks to AI, you can have personalized question papers in millions. So copying is just not possible. So you actually don't need invigilation, because when there is no copying possible, there is no need for invigilation. That's what technology will take us to. And with AI being able to read text and multimodal responses, AI will be able to scale actual question papers the way people write. The reason why we go for these multiple choice questions, etc., simply because we cannot scale to millions of students. So we go for that. But today, AI system will actually be able to read text, multimodal information, and still grade at, again, population scale. So what it means is that I will kind of take one more minute to tell you that I met somebody after 32 years in the airport. And he walked up to me and said, "Sir, we remember your homeworks." I said, what makes you remember? I used to make copious notes on the homeworks.
Mm.
And then if you make a mistake in 4 steps, if you make a mistake in the first step, normally you kind of don't get any grade for the whole question. But I used to kind of give back that one, and if the other questions were consistent with the first one, give them the full credit. And they said, we look forward to your corrected papers. Okay, so that is what I did not realize it. But what happens is it is not scalable. And some of my friends even used to tell me I'm wasting too much time on this grading. But today, AI, you can do it with scale, and then every
Mhm.
person. And once you do that, students will look forward to exams and not avoid exams. I think that is the power of AI. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. And going back to something else that you had said, that you don't believe it will, replace university or anything along those lines, that university is still very important. For the full panel, I'll open it up. Curious to hear how you think students should decide, what to study these days, when AI, seems to be able to learn almost anything. And so I'd love to hear your positions on that.
If I may, I don't think AI can learn anything. That's certainly not where we are yet. There's a question here around, and maybe this is a very philosophical question, or a very philosophically motivated response. But at the moment we're looking at generative AI, right, which predicts. It identifies patterns, and it generates strings of words or collections of pixels that have been statistically demonstrated to align with what humans expect to see, right? I think we can dream about what's actual, super intelligence or even non-generative artificial intelligence could accomplish, but that's not where we are yet. And so for the moment, I think we're maybe left with the question of, well, what is best for students? How can we use AI in responsible ways to ensure that students get the outcomes that they are seeking? Right? I think from my perspective, from the perspective, we're trying to look at how we might use AI at Woolf is we always go back to that question of, how do we adopt this student-centered approach? How do we ensure that students are getting the best out of their education? How can we supercharge education with AI tools without compromising the essential skills that students need to have: critical thinking, right? Creativity, initiative, their own voice, right? And particularly that last one, I think, is so important in a system in which we can have generative AI, generate an essay from the perspective of Karl Marx. Where is creativity? And creativity, I think, needs to always be encouraged. And I think we really need to work with AI tools in a way that keeps foregrounding those principles.
I think the need for the fundamentals, if I was to focus on higher ed and even school education, I think the need for the core mission of higher ed to be fulfilled is still there, even with AI, which is some of the things that Martin is talking about. So higher ed was really about unlocking your curiosity, finding your own voice, being able to do critical thinking. Somehow there is an impression getting created that all of these can be outsourced to generative AI as it stands today. And obviously it can, and a lot of it will. So it's like calculators. Even I was born in an era of calculators. So complex math problems, we were allowed to use calculators. We never had to really do I know how to do division by hand of complicated numbers, but most people probably haven't been taught that. And we used calculators to do division. But that doesn't mean that we did not have to understand the mathematical implications of what a division means and what a fraction means and what remainders mean and so on. I don't want to get into a technical discussion, but in the same way, I feel that bar for actually getting a high quality higher education just went up. A lot of the pronouncements that this is going to just kill all education is driven of the fact that a lot of education had become about rote learning. So you learn things to score on an exam, and that score got you something, and then you forgot what you learned because you only did that to get a score on an exam. Now, clearly, that kind of education does it gets further disrupted by AI. Even earlier, it was not providing any education. People were still going back to the books to recall if something was to be recalled later to apply to the real world. But I think the last thing I'll say is that intelligently using AI, and which is where the human element comes in, requires still the basic education, high quality education that we got, which has been the purpose of higher education for 5,000 years when the first universities came up on the northwestern ramparts of India. So I think that we should not forget that just yet the kind of intelligence that Martin is and a lot of people are foreseeing in the future is not upon us yet, which is that whole idea of a super intelligence. One of the last, actually, I will say one other thing. Somebody told me, gave me an analogy that has worked really well for me. And it's may sound a bit cute, but it captures the point. And I think it was the guy who started Perplexity. He said it in a TED talk somewhere that what we have right now is all the possible answers that you can formulate about the world based on what we already have written down or spoken or captured are now out there in the world or the cyber world. The question, you have to know what is the right question to ask. The answers are all there. So you don't have to figure out the answer in most cases. The answers are all there. But the bigger challenge now is what do you ask?
Right.
And I think that is it sounds like a cute thing to say, but it's actually very profound. And that's the challenge we have, is how do you train people to constantly ask the right questions and use this very powerful tool to solve real problems, not just improving your email to your boss or plagiarizing an essay, but really to solve real problems in the world. And I think that's where the power of education combined with AI comes in.
Thank you. Dr. Martin, I see you're off mute. I don't know if you had a point.
I think Pramath, this is really really valuable insight, and I completely agree that the stage that we're at is the stage where we need to both look ahead to what the possibilities may be in the future, but also to really very clearly think about how this tool that seems maybe too good to be true at times, right? How we use it in the ways that best actually empower education, right? We've seen, for example, in a recent UK government report, that many primary and secondary school teachers are finding it very, very valuable to generate, for example, supporting resources with, not actually generate the curriculum, but generate, illustrative ways in which they can teach the curriculum. And it's those kinds of things where perhaps the possibilities at the moment lie for really, in a positive way, engaging with AI in education. Keeping in mind that the learner-centric approach that we need to be taking. How do we instill? How do we not lose sight of education's core mission to raise students, all students, from youngest ages to adult learners? How do we train them to be responsible citizens? How do we help them find their voice, their academic voice, their writing voice, their creativity? Education supports all of those objectives, and AI has a place in probably some of them, maybe not all of them, or maybe all of them, depending on how this develops. But those, to me, those are the real key questions, right? If we free up resources that previously were spent doing, rote learning. You mentioned, of course, certain parts of the world are very strongly into rote learning. Does that mean that we free up more space and time for students to develop their creativity, to develop their own curiosity, to pursue the things that they want to be pursuing, to help them develop as humans, as people? That to me is where the real exciting aspects of AI in education lie, that we can promote that mission even further.
Thank you. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and focus on the technical curriculum that we see in computer science, AI, things along those lines. And so a question for Abhimanyu, at Scalar, you guys are offering a master's in computer science. I wanted to hear from you a little bit about, how the curriculum is shifting when we're sort of, moving away from the actual programming languages and kind of towards prompting with AI.
No, I think I will answer at two or three different levels. On one side, if I start at the, while relevant for a much smaller subset when we talk about the population level, but for someone who is pursuing a master's program in computer science, some of the subsets of the subject which were an interesting exploratory phase, for example, the internals of LLMs, how tokenizers work, these nitty-gritties, how does how do these models climb the hill of intelligence? I think now for someone who is looking at building deep expertise in the domain, potentially want to pursue a research domain or building the frontier models, I think these now have become much more relevant. While earlier it was one of the sub segment of CS research, but now it has real industry applications and massive financial rewards as well for people who are deep experts in it. But of course, it's not a pie for everyone. It's a little bit like, let's say, becoming the expert surgeon in a super specialized field. Very lucrative, very interesting, a lot of impact, but at the same time require the right foundation. And then when I switch gear and talk about, let's say, more undergrad curriculum, a 18-year-old who is just starting his undergrad journey or her undergrad journey, I think it's very interesting. So on one side, there is a view that, and we are not there yet, but one argument is that, say, 40 years back, for example, when Professor Sadagopan might have been in his undergrad, probably they would have looked at even the internals of the assembly code, or even maybe the punch cards, that exactly how each bit inside the computer is being flipped. And then we had invention of these super smart compilers. And our generation never looked at the assembly code, etc. And we only had to care about the logic. One argument is that if there is a world where these LLMs can start writing near perfect code given the right instructions, do people even need to learn the syntax? But I know for a fact, being a programmer myself, we are not there today. Someone who just use LLM to generate code but doesn't know how these languages really work, more often than not, they will end up with a very faulty and buggy system, right? Now, over next few years, maybe next 6 months or 2 years or 5 years, when might we cross that threshold where we say that just like compilers, now there is a near perfect or perfect compiler to translate a human language instructions into machine code. Uh, Maybe 5 years down the line, we might say that a computer programming language like C, C++, Java are as good as assembly code that no programmer looks at today anymore. Uh, Again, I think we don't know when that inflection point come and if it comes at all or doesn't. But in the interim, I think it's important until that inflection point comes. I think it's important for kids to a young undergrad student to learn the fundamentals, be able to take a deep dive into the nitty-gritties and be able to fix that.
Absolutely.
If I can dive in real quick, Abhimanyu,
Yeah.
with an example of this, it reminds me of, if you're learning a language, right? You could there's the Duolingo model, which fascinates me, right? You learn a great host of completely nonsensical sentences, but what it teaches you, and you don't know that it's teaching you, is the grammar of the language. Because, traditionally, if you take a master's course in, I studied a lot of extremely dead languages. If you're learning Akkadian cuneiform, right, you're learning the grammar of the language first, and then you learn the vocabulary. And generally speaking, when you're translating, you use a dictionary because you're not going to learn, 7,000-8,000 words of an extinct language. You use the tools to get the most out of it what you can. If your conversational Spanish needs to be good enough to have a business meeting with someone, you're not going to have a dictionary at hand. Now, of course, maybe live translation is going to be a thing, is already kind of a thing. But generally speaking, if you're learning a language, you're going to need to have the basics. You need to intuitively comprehend the grammar in a way that Duolingo teaches you, for example, and other models too, but it works well. You need to have the vocabulary ready at hand. You can't be searching for basic words all the time. And so I think, to your point, there's a real question of, like, what is the basic education that we give people to be AI literate in ways that support their further learning, right? How do you teach someone what the limitations are? And that, I think, again, comes back to the question of, how do we encourage critical faculties? How do we ensure that students from a young age know what works well and what doesn't work well about these models? So I think that I hope that's a helpful analogy.
Yeah. Let me add my 2 lines. Lacey? Okay.
Yes.
Coding will be like any other skills like reading, writing, etc., which are accepted as human skills. I think in the next couple of years, couple of months, it will become like another skill. So everybody will code. Because Pramath took the example of Excel macro, I will use the Excel macro example. Vibe coding will be like writing Excel macros. Many people routinely do it. But, as an academic, I also will ask this interesting question. How many of you will be able to write Excel? It is one thing to write Excel macro, but it is another thing to write Excel itself. Okay? So there is obviously a need for great programmers that will continue, but everyone will become a programmer. That is also true. It's a very interesting time. And a lot of time people get mixed up with this prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is great, but I'm sure it is a question of time when something else will subsume prompt engineering into something much bigger. The way I look at it is that I'm an old guy. So we have been having varieties of grades of software. So many of you may not even know there used to be separate software which you purchase for $49 called spell checkers. Spelling checkers, right? So nobody talks about them. They're part of the word processing software today, right? So in a sense that things like prompt engineering at this point in time make sense. But my own feeling is over the years, it will grow into something much larger. I think Abhimanyu made some very interesting points. So I think it is a question of evolution. But the evolution, when it goes through, it's kind of hard to predict exactly what shape it will take. Just wait and watch. And it is happening at a much faster time. And that is what makes it difficult these days, because things used to take place in years is now taking place in months, makes it quite difficult. But I think it's an interesting time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the evolution of the prompt engineer, I think, is a very interesting point. I'm curious to hear how like curriculum really that like how often do you foresee needing to update your curriculum at Scalar, Abhimanyu? Is that something that's happening daily or yeah, how often are you updating things?
Okay, you see, it obviously will not happen daily. Should not happen daily. We
Sure.
should not do things too slow. Okay, but I think, as I said, I think what is important is as long as we guys are smart enough to realize that the smarter tools are coming, smartness is actually all about using the smarter tools to make the smart guy the smartest, right? Just because they are smarter than you, don't give up. You can actually use them to actually kind of write out them. I think that is what is happening. That's why I gave the example today. We actually give the exam and we also give a solution to the exam based on ChatGPT and ask the student to improvise on. So that we are actually taking that, we're factoring it in. So we are not staying away from the tools, but we also realize that better tools are coming tomorrow. So we should be ready to master those tools also. So we don't look at only tomorrow, we look at a depth tomorrow and beyond. I think that long-term thinking that is built into the education is what makes education such a fascinating stuff. So it is all about learning. It is not just memorization. It's all about learning. And as one of my students puts it nicely, it does not matter as to what you learn. What matters is how well you learn. What matters is how well you learn. I'll stop here. Thank you.
And Lexi, on that, your question of curriculum, I think there is another very fundamental change that has been in the play actually for decades, and I think it's getting more and more visible now. So traditionally, historically, our way of learning has been that you just learn for maybe 4 years or 8 years of your higher education, and then you figure out how you apply in the real world. Right? And slowly, the two things are getting intermingled a lot. I share one interesting anecdote that, last month, there was a meeting that I had with someone whose position is head of data at one of the top 5 AI research labs worth probably hundreds of billions. And when I entered the room, this is a 21-year-old gentleman who is yet to even finish his undergrad studies. Right? And I was very curious. Of course, he's very capable. He's building big things. How did that happen? Because since he was 15, he was learning and doing. He was not in the framework. While these are extreme outliers, of course, we cannot say that this is a generalized use case. But what was happening with this person is that even when he was 16 or 18 or 20, he was already building and learning. He was already contributing to open source projects. He was already working with the top AI researchers in the world, cleaning the data for them or building systems to make their systems more efficient. And I think slowly it's a spectrum, but more and more students, even what I see is that the best performing students today, they are not in the framework of that for next 4 years, I'm only going to attend the classes, pass the exams, graduate, and then go and do something with that. But they are integrating their learning and doing both together. And in this framework, actually, then argument might be that while, of course, a structured curriculum of a program, of a degree cannot change every day, probably it can't even change every month, maybe it could change once or twice in a year. But the kids, the students who are learning and doing, practically, I might argue that they are updating their curriculum every hour. Because today they are using one particular technology set, and tomorrow, if there's an updated version of it, they are already using it. So I think that way, I think students who are, so rather, I think it's a question of creating an ecosystem and environment where people do and learn. And in that ecosystem, I think curriculum automatically becomes extremely fluid.
Excellent. Thank you. Just taking a pause. For those of you who are in the audience, I see some questions coming in. So we will leave probably about 10 minutes at the end to address those. So do please keep putting your questions in the chat and also in the the Q&A. We will get to those. Great. So just another question for this panel. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but in an AI integrated world, what do you all believe should count as cheating, and then what should count as mastery? How do you talk about those two things?
Okay.
I think use of AI is not cheating, but the mastery of using AI is the mastery that you have to test people on. So I don't know, maybe the tests, if we have to do tests, will have to become just written tests where people have to sit and write in front of an instructor. And they can use AI, but they would have to put down their own thoughts of how they went about capturing or doing the research. So they take you through the process of their thinking rather than just the output.
Okay, so let me add, you see, unfair access and unfair advantage are things that should not be there. Okay, so if cheating allows somebody unfair advantage, we have to ensure that it stops. So that is there. But I think what is increasingly happening is AI will do this job much better. As I alluded to in my earlier part, the fact that we cannot have a population scale evaluation forced us to think in terms of multiple choice questions, etc., etc. But AI will actually do population scale assessment, in which case things will automatically go away. But a larger question is integrity. Integrity is part of the value system. And I think for the larger good of the planet, integrity, value education, etc., should get their importance. Along with the law, legislation, law enforcement, social values, all of them actually have to evolve. Okay, so if you really look at fire, okay, fire safety evolved over a period of time. Similarly, road safety evolved over a period of time. You really will not know what things to do until you actually have the roads and the automobiles, etc. And remember, fire safety was always looked at by a simple stuff. But once the skyscrapers came, there was a completely new dimension of fire safety. So I think some of these things will kind of evolve, and no one knows exactly the path. And let me kind of conclude by saying that the first generation of cement manufacturers or the automotive manufacturers would not have been able to predict today's urbanization, right? The challenges which are kind of come up today due to urbanization, okay, would not have been predicted at that time. So similarly, what are the challenges which AI is going to pose? We really do not know. But as long as we are willing to learn, keep our eyes and ears open to learning and constantly learn, we'll be there. I think it is important, but only thing I am worried about is there should be fairness in all our dealings. I think as long as that is taken care of, everything else will be in good shape. Thank you.
I think a key question here as well is the really fundamental question of what is the purpose of assessment, right? What are we measuring? How are we measuring it? What is the purpose of what is the outcome, the intended outcome of the education that we're getting? And we may find that AI is just not good at assessing that in certain ways. We may find that there is a role for AI in assessing that, right? I mean, you can't use AI to assess a fine art degree. Or maybe there are ways in which you can use AI to assess particular types of background knowledge you need to have in order to satisfy the overall requirements of the degree. But AI can't critique whether a painting is artistic, particularly when you go further away from the technological aligned subjects towards even the social sciences, to the humanities, to particularly to really creative subjects. The way in which we assess whether someone masters a subject becomes so inherently human centric. it becomes very hard to integrate AI in some of those aspects. On the other hand, I think thinking about it constructively, we can start to look at ways in which we might use AI to support these learning outcomes rather than trying to make AI fit a model in which it does everything because it is being pushed to do everything, right? And I think to Professor Sadagopan's point, we need to be really aware of inequality. Not everyone has access to internet. Like the world probably doesn't. Was it Sam Altman's point on like we want to cover the entire planet in data warehouses to support generative AI? Like, I mean, presumably he was hyperbolic, but that is what would be needed in order to give everyone equitable access to these kinds of tools, which simply isn't possible. So we do need to be really conscientious of that, as well as someone else pointed out, the regulatory frameworks, right? There are wildly different approaches to the use of AI in education particularly between the US, the EU, and India. India is I think the only one to actually mandate AI education at the moment. The EU and the US aren't even there yet. So those are all things I think that we need to be very, very conscientious about and make sure that whatever the landscape ends up looking like, we keep in mind the ultimate goal, which is we are serving people here. We're serving people, students, learners of all ages, to become the best possible they can be. And we need to do that within these responsible guardrails that we have the responsibility of guiding, I think, as between us, to some extent, leading voices in these conversations.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a final question, and then I'm going to look at our Q&A. Again, we've touched on this a little bit, but for the full panel, wanted to open this up. If we redesign degrees today for an AI native world, what should they look like?
I will put it in the outcome. Okay. I'll put it very short one. Degrees with stuff will always be relevant. Degrees without stuff, but loaded with buzzwords, are there only because the HR guys are asleep. Okay. But once they realize the value of the stuff, I think people will do. But I think what exactly it is, one has to get into specific details. Going back to what I said earlier, it's not that matters what you learn, how well you learn. So that is what the degrees with stuff. Thank you.
No, I think I'll just add that it becomes now even harder problem for the education governance organizations, universities. World always need a signaling mechanism that these are the people who are proficient at doing something. And degrees were supposed to be that proof, because it is hard for the world to every time go and figure out that who is the person who is really proficient at doing this. How do we make sure? Because as the question rightly said, that it's easier to fake now with the help of AI. So I think it in a way increases the responsibility, makes the work harder for every university, let's say, the organizations that are supposed to keep the governance at the universities, that how do we ensure that the degree continues signaling the right value? And I'm sure that few will do it, few will not. The degrees which fail to certify with accuracy will lose relevance. But at the same time, the degrees and the certifications that continue having a strong correlation with real skills, real knowledge, they'll continue having high relevance.
Great.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I was surprised when I recently visited the United States that even though you always feel the US is ahead in these matters, the US universities are totally lost, even the top universities.
That's true.
The lag between technological disruptions, industry adaptation, and university meeting that need is multiple years, sometimes decades. So doing this quickly is not going to happen. I feel that there's a certain lag time that takes place. So many people are trying to move ahead quickly because the pace and the pressure seems to be greater this time, but they're still lost. They're trying to do whatever they can because you can redesign a curriculum, but somebody has to deliver it. In fact, probably an LLM can redesign your curriculum quite nicely and say, here's what you should teach, and but who are the people who are trained to be able to, and where are all the people that will be needed to train all the people in this stuff? So I do think that there's some real fundamental challenges here where unfortunately, it's not about somebody asked a question about access and inaccess. I think it's about people's motivation to learn or not learn. That is actually more important. By virtue of online courses and stuff that you guys are doing, the truth is that it is accessible reasonably. Sometimes there may be a money issue, but we just designed a course. My firm in India worked with J3, worked with the Department of Electronics and Information Technology to create an online course, which is available for free on basic artificial intelligence. People can go learn, and it's for free, and it's done very well, very easily understandable. So I think it's going to be a much more a question of who will be motivated to learn and get themselves quickly up to speed.
Thank you. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. Thank you to all of the panelists for your thoughtful comments. I'm going to go into the Q&A. We've got great questions. I think we've addressed the first one in the chat from Praveen, but there's another one which I'm going to click that we will answer live. I don't think that did anything though. I'll read it out. So when students have easy access to AI assistance, how does it affect their willingness to struggle through difficult problems, a struggle that's often essential for deep learning? That's a question to the group.
Just because they have access to a lot more information does not make their life any easy. Because today, with that information, I can actually ask a more challenging question. So maybe as an instructor, I had the limitation of also putting some controls on what are the hard questions I ask. Today, I am free from that because they have access to much more information. I can give them a much harder problem. I think it is good. It's good for all of us because as a whole, as a society, we will be challenging. We'll be kind of facing a lot more challenging problems. Very simple example. For an urban city like Bangalore, there are traffic-related problems. Earlier, the thought was only people who have trained for years and decades in traffic engineering could come up with solutions. Today, school children can come up with solutions, but not all of them may be workable. But the fact that we have many more solutions to choose from, and the expert can choose much better job because expert suddenly gets millions of hands to him or her. So I think it's a great time. I think that is how we should kind of take the AA journey along. That's my take.
Thank you. Another question that came into the chat. So given that knowledge is instantaneously available via conversations with an AI/LLM, learning to learn, learning to rigorously think, learning to do things have to become central to the human learning experience. Everything else that we do doesn't change, isn't it? I might not have read that correctly, but it's in the chat. So open to the panel on that.
I think I would agree with that. I think he meant that everything else would need to change. Otherwise, if you read it, there's a typo somewhere, or I may have read it. It sounds like nothing will have to change, but I think what he means is that remains, but the rest will have to change, and I agree with that. That's very well put.
Yeah.
It goes back to that question of, how does AI let us teach learners those really fundamental skills, those, which I would argue are really truly key to what education provides you, being a more engaged, a more critically motivated, a more creative part of society, right? Education isn't just about learning knowledge, picking up skills. It's about those interpersonal relationships. I mean, I'm sure all of us remember being in our first year of undergrad, the kinds of experiences you have, going off to a campus, or meeting new people from all walks of life in different parts of the world. Like that is a transformative aspect of education that I would argue is really, really crucial for it. And I mean, I'm open to the ways in which AI can play a role in that, but as long as we keep sight of those really crucial aspects, I think that's the most important thing. Also, I'm afraid I have to dash, but thank you all so much for your time. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's two more questions, which we will not be able to get to today, but I will coordinate with speakers and see if we can get an answer out to you guys. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It was
you.
great. Thank you.
Speak soon. Bye-bye.